bands who should have been huge. Have you ever heard of Galactic Cowboys, a band out of Houston? They were signed to Geffen and released a couple of albums in the early 90s, a self-titled debut, and their sophomore effort, Space in Your Face. A few more releases followed on Metal Blade before they disbanded around 2000. I absolutely loved their unique mix of Beatlesque vocal harmonies and thrashing riffs with interesting lyrics to boot. If you're familiar with them, I'd love to hear your take. Thanks, Dave in St. Louis. Dave, I am absolutely familiar with Galactic Cowboys, and here's why. They were affiliated with King's X back in the day. You mentioned correctly that they were indeed from Houston, as was King's X. So you may or may not know that I had a hand in the initial signing of King's X because I was the vice president of Megaforce Records, their label, when they were signed in 87. So I absolutely was affiliated with and tied into the earliest days of King's X. And when King's X were signed, they were a band, and this is something that's discussed a lot. King's X were a band that everyone felt were going to be huge. People are baffled to this day to learn that King's X have never even had a gold record. But there was a buzz about King's X, despite the fact they never even sold records. But there was a buzz about them. And people started to trace their lineage and their history a little bit. And the guy who managed King's X back then, a guy named Sam Taylor, I believe Galactic Cowboys were also being repped by him. So the music industry is very copycat. Always has been, always will be. So if one producer gets hot, if a manager gets hot, if somebody's known for having a big band, people immediately start sniffing around that same hive to see if there's another cool band that they may have an interest in working with. And in this instance, it was Galactic Cowboys, because King's X had, even though they weren't selling records, they were very loved and people thought they were going to be big. And Galactic Cowboys came out of the King's X camp and ended up getting their own record deal and doing their own thing, and unfortunately became far less successful than even King's X. But I'm aware of the band. I had seen them live back in the day. I certainly know about them because of the connection to King's X when they first started. This one comes from Jesse, and Jesse writes, it doesn't say where Jesse's from. Do you think Kiss or Paul Stanley are lip syncing? He's had recent health problems. Jesse, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. All I can tell you is just go on YouTube, man, and make your own assessments. If there are people not even near a vocal mic with vocals coming out of the PA, I think that pretty much answers your question. Me saying it yet again is just going to make it look like I have some agenda. It's not an agenda against Kiss. It's an agenda against every single band that does not truly play live or allegedly does not truly play live. And I have a huge issue with it. I think it's absolutely ludicrous. I think too many people are looking the other way at it. And about half of the bands out there that you see have some sort of supplementation with the computer going on. And it's, I don't know. Call me crazy. Call me controversial for going to a live show and wanting to actually hear a band truly play live. Wow, is that a radical idea, huh? Some people would make you believe that's a radical idea. That's why I'm saying that sarcastically. So, as far as Paul's health problems, look, Gene had health problems that resulted in shows being rescheduled. I saw some ticket counts for the shows that were impacted, and they were unbelievably low. But I'm not denying the guy may have been sick. I don't know. I'm not on the inside. I don't know. Paul Stanley, they just canceled their entire Australian tour because Paul Stanley has the flu. That just happened, a week ago. I understand these guys are older. If you are a Kiss fan, we have had so much smoke and mirrors and misinformation put out to us for decades now. Anything's possible as to what's accurate and what's not. It's a little suspect that the flu knocks out an entire tour. To me, yeah, but then again, the guy's 68 years old or whatever. If he got it, I don't know. I'm not saying one thing or the other, but our emailer was not the first fan to raise an eyebrow a bit at some of the recent Kiss cancellations on their tour and the reasons given for such. Do I know for a fact one way or the other? I do not. This one comes from Steve. Steve is from Sacramento. Eddie, I have to tell you, I went to the opening show of the current UFO tour in San Fran. So great. Armored Saint opened, sounded amazing as well. I have two bands that should have been huge. Wow, we're getting a resurgence of the should have been huge topic. Super popular when I do that. We'll do it again soon. He writes, one I know you've heard of and one less well known, but both have a similar sound. The one you have heard of is Power Mad. Do you have any history with them? The more obscure band is Mind Over 4, proggy metal, late 80s, early 90s. I assume grunge swallowed them up. So, Steve, you're right. Power Mad I've heard of, but don't really know anything about and have any history with. And you are also right. In Mind Over 4, I have never heard of. Power Mad I've heard of, and that's about it, Steve. Thank you for that. Wish I could give you more. This comes from Bill. Bill does not write where he's from, but he writes, is it possible that when a band has had several lineup changes, only full members get inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or at least play a part in getting inducted? I thought of this when I heard Jason Newsted say that he joined Metallica as a full member. I know that Robert Trujillo joined as a full member. It was mentioned at the time, which would explain why he was inducted with the band despite being a member for such a short time. No, Bill, I don't think that has anything to do with it at all. I understand where you're going with your question, which basically Bill is saying, does the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just ask the question, well, is the guy a hired gun or really a member of the band? And that's how they decide which members of such bands get into the Hall of Fame. That is not the case at all. I think the Hall of, because there are tons of people inducted as members of a band into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame who are indeed hired guns or not full members. Tons. I mean, just a few years ago with Bon Jovi, everybody knows John Bon Jovi's the only member of Bon Jovi signed to that record deal from day one. So you can make the case everybody else in Bon Jovi is a hired gun to a degree. And with Bon Jovi, they let in Hugh McDonald, who was a session guy that wasn't even credited on half of the records he played on. So that blows that theory right out of the water. I think it's just the Hall of Fame and their committee coming up with their assessments, which sometimes are often very wrong. But let's also realize this, Bill and everyone else. There are a tremendous amount of politics involved in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The most glaring, ridiculous oversight in history was Dio not being included with Sabbath. But do you really think Sharon Osbourne was going to allow that? So they pulled a power trip, I'm sure. You know, that's not happening. We don't want that. Or the Hall of Fame was just too clueless to even realize there was a Dio era that was super important to people. Whatever the case may be, that was a travesty that to this day should still be fixed. Look what's happening now with Motorhead on the ballot. Travesty that Phil Campbell and Mickey D were not on the ballot. At least they caught that one and fixed it. And I have no ill will toward Robert Trujillo. I like him very much, but it was indeed head-scratching that the guy had been in Metallica for like a year, or seemed like a year, and was going in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So it doesn't... There is so much made of who is and isn't getting in, but then it gets even more ludicrous when you look at who is and isn't being inducted from any given band, and there are major issues with that. That is the next level of absurdity when you think about it. It's a process and a part of the process that has to be cleaned up. Because it's now getting to the point where it's really random, and we're seeing them change things, and yeah, great. It's great that you're catching some stuff and fixing it and changing it, but let's get it right the first time around. Because unfortunately now Dio doesn't have a chance at going in with Sabbath because the induction already happened. There's a huge degree of politics with this. There was a ton of politics with the Kiss thing that went on because Gene and Paul refused to play with Ace and Peter. Ace and Peter refused to show up if Kiss played with the current version of the band. So the compromise was nobody plays. Who lost in that? Us, the fans, who screamed and yelled for Kiss to go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They finally got in, and we got shortchanged on the night because of political nonsense. So there's tons of bands that get it right, and there's tons that get it wrong. Sometimes it's their own fault for being stubborn or selfish, whatever the case may be. And sometimes it's just the Hall of Fame not having a clue. Hey, we're out of time on the emails already. Man, that was fun. We will do a full mailbag show soon, I promise you. I thank you all for your emails. I apologize if I don't have time to respond either through writing or on this show.